start recording this. Did you hear me? Hello. Hey.
Hey.
Do you hear me?
I hear you very softly only.
Let me check. Okay, maybe I have to come closer.
Yeah, I think that's it. It was like this always in the past that when people are too far away, or actually they have to be very close to the what is it, a computer, I guess. Yeah.
How are you today?
I'm fine. I'm fine. We have wonderful weather here. It's very sunny, and the birds are singing. It's almost like spring. Many kind of bushes are full of or trees are full of flowers. So we're getting there. How is the weather in Romania?
Better. It's hot here too.
It's hot. Eh?
Yes, yes, yes.
What temperature do you have
I don't know.
roughly? 25?
40 degrees actually not so much, but it's enough
Okay, cool.
for February.
So Maurice is not here today, no?
No, he couldn't come.
And so we're like 4 people or something, no?
Yes, we are four.
Hello. There's a third one. Okay, I see 3. Somebody's hiding. I don't know. Here's another one. No. Yeah. Okay. Good. Now I saw everybody. Right. Did you do your meditation and your motivation beforehand?
Yes.
Yeah, you did. Okay. Wonderful. That's good. So I don't know what you want to do. I mean, we planned this originally to be about Mahayana tonight. Like we were talking about the 3 levels of the Lamrim. That there's an initial level, and then a middle level, and then the great scope, which is the Mahayana. So do you want to do that, or do you want to go back to what? Because last time we were only 2 people. So I wonder if, like, you had a discussion group, no? Didn't you?
We got the discussion group, but actually we watched the video again.
Okay, cool. So, were there any kind of questions out of this present what I was talking about last time with the middle scope? Any remarks or any questions about that?
Actually, no.
Actually, no, everything very clear. That's amazing. I'm studying here for 20 years to get this clear, and you've got it immediately. That's amazing. Okay, good. Anyway, that's cool. So you watched the video, so that's okay. So right, so now we're going to talk tonight about the Mahayana. So that's called the great vehicle. Mahayana means the great vehicle. And so this is in the Lamrim. This is called the great scope. So the Lamrim, just to recall that, is a certain kind of genre of spiritual texts, which are trying to put all the different teachings that the Buddha gave over all his life to all kinds of different people into an order, into a structure. And so it starts actually the way Lama Tsongkhapa is doing things. It starts with Guru devotion, then it continues with precious human rebirth, and then it's talking about the practices, as it says, that are common with those of the small scope. So this is those of the small scope are those who want to influence their death process. They want to influence the fact that they are taking rebirth again and again, such that they are manipulating or working with this process so they're going to get a very good, a very conducive rebirth. And that's all what they want to do. They just want to kind of manipulate the death process, which is already something quite amazing. If you think about most people on this planet, they have no thoughts like that. But then the middle scope being the practices that are described there are called those practices we have in common with the middle scope being. So a middle scope being is somebody who is actually fed up with all of samsara, with all of these rebirths, and he wants to get rid of all of samsara, which is something that he has experienced, the samsara, since beginningless lifetimes. Unimaginable amounts of time he has undergone this kind of rebirths, and now he wants to destroy this mechanism. That's really amazingly revolutionary. He's really kind of changing his personal universe from the ground, completely destroying the foundations of that universe. And he does so because he thinks this universe is actually unsatisfying, or is very flawed, or has a lot of problems. So he actually wants to get rid of this universe in order to break through to a complete new reality, a complete new way of living. Actually, a new way of living that is unflawed, that is completely free and is purified, and is allowing him to actually have continuous peace, continuous bliss, openness, and so forth, freedom. So both of these steps to actually be so much in charge of the fact that you're going to die, so much in charge of the fact that you have mind, and that you have, therefore, from that point of view, you have something that is indestructible, this very mind, that you are actually working towards influencing big amounts of time into the future by organizing your rebirths. And then even going beyond that to make a complete universal revolution by changing the whole system, by getting out of samsara, attaining liberation from that, going into nirvana. These are amazing, let's say, amazingly courageous projects. This person has really quite some courage, quite some confidence also, that all of this is possible, and he's really embarking on a huge spiritual journey. Completely new lands. So that's all quite impressive, I have to say. So the Mahayana is going far, far beyond that. And it's going far beyond that because it's changing the perspective completely. It's changing the perspective away from what is going on with my mind stream, with my rebirths, with my death and rebirth and redeath and rebirth, how I can influence that. And it's going away from that I want to be free of this kind of mechanism of the universe, this mechanism of samsara, and attain a completely new universe, new life in nirvana. And it's turning around to everybody else. And is starting by understanding that you yourself are completely equal to everybody else, in the same way that you are having all kind of problems, although you don't want problems. Everybody around you has problems, although they don't want to have problems. It is dealing with that you want to be happy in a lasting way, in a peaceful way. You want to open, you want to develop yourself, you want to free yourself, you want to free yourself from any kind of obscuration or hindrances for your inner purity, for your inner happiness, joy, bliss, and so forth. But the same thing is true for everybody around you. Yeah? So, for example, here in this very room, yeah, you're listening now to some teachings or to some description and so forth, and you do that because you want to be happy, you don't want to suffer. You think you might get something out of this teaching. That's probably why you came tonight. But the same thing is true for everybody in the room. Point of view that they want to be happy and they don't want to suffer, while they actually are experiencing all kinds of problems, and why they're actually not having that much happiness as they actually are looking for. So the same thing is even true for everybody in that building that you are right now, and everybody in that street, everybody in that city. Everybody in Romania, everybody in Europe, everybody on this whole planet. Even the animals are like this. So it's true for everybody. So what is actually something you need to understand about yourself, that you want to be happy and you don't want to suffer, and that you have the capacity, you have the potential to be limitlessly free and limitlessly happy and blissful without any suffering. That very thing is true for everybody around you, for anything that is alive, any human being, any man, any woman, any animal, any human, anything that is alive. So when we even then consider these other life forms that Buddhism is describing, like so-called hell beings or gods or what have you. Yeah. So all these beings, yeah, even the invisible realm, like spirits and what have you. So all these beings also want to be happy. They don't want to suffer, exactly like yourself. Exactly like yourself. So this is where the Mahayana actually comes from. It comes from understanding that you are just one person, but actually the problem is much bigger than just your problem. It is universal. So the Mahayana actually is taking on the responsibility for all so-called sentient beings, for everything that's alive, for all sentient beings, to lead them to complete enlightenment. So that's like this is such a mouthful to say that you're gonna take on the responsibility that everybody becomes completely enlightened. That normally we cannot even relate to that. We just kind of say it. It comes in prayers and so forth. But to actually get this kind of feeling that somebody could generate a mind that he or she is feeling responsible for the benefit of all sentient beings. Everybody, you go out of the house, whoever you meet in the street, that person is your project. That person's happiness and bliss is your project. To liberate that person of all the things that you found inside of yourself. Yeah, for example, that this person that you're meeting in the street is somebody who is threatened by death, can die any moment, and then there is any kind of rebirth possible according to his or her karma. So you're going to take the responsibility to save these beings from the lower realms. And not only that, you will take on the responsibility to take all of them out of the state of being in samsara. So this unperceivable idea that you could revolutionize your own universe by destroying your own samsara and stepping into a completely new plane of existence, which is nirvana, this by now becomes your project of everybody you meet in the street, everybody you meet in the supermarket. It goes so far, as I said, that you would go, when you see dogs or cats in the street, they are your project. When you have mosquitoes in your room, they are your project. Everything alive now becomes your project to actually deal with their state of afflictions, their fears, their mortality, their karmas, their processes of samsara, and so forth. Yeah. So that's what is happening in the mind of a Mahayanist. So maybe we can recall for us that all these different stages, the small scope, the middle scope, and the great scope of the Mahayana, have always two parts. One is the part of motivation. Yeah, so kind of you need to prepare yourself to actually be part of this kind of level. You need to have an understanding on the small scope that you're gonna die and that there's rebirth and that you can influence it according to your karma and so forth. And when you have understood that, then on that basis, on this basis of motivation, of understanding, you then engage in the practices. Or on the middle scope, you need to understand how there is an alternative to samsara. You need to understand how samsara in all of its forms, even within the human rebirth or in the God rebirth, is unsatisfactory, is not that what you're actually looking for. And with this understanding, understanding that samsara is flawed, then you get the motivation to look for something else. And then once you have this motivation, then you actually engage in the practices that are leading to nirvana. And so the same thing is true here. First, there's a first step where you're generating this outlook that I was just describing, that you are actually going away from just kind of looking at how you could develop yourself for your own benefit. You transform that into taking everybody else as the center of your life. Like right now, you are the center of your universe. This is completely normal. This is not an accusation or something like that. It's completely normal that we see ourselves in the center. But what the Mahayana is saying is that that's just a choice. We could also choose very differently. We could choose to take everybody else as the center of the universe, and we are catering to that center of the universe. We are working towards them. For example, when you see high beings like the Dalai Lama, is continuously active in order to benefit sentient beings. In order, I mean, of course, the thing is that, of course, even if you have this attitude to benefit sentient beings, you can benefit people in different ways. So when His Holiness is giving a teaching, then the people who come there, they can greatly benefit from his advice and from his explanation. And if he just sees people outside and shakes their hand, then there might be a slight benefit, but not so much. And then most people don't even come to shake his hand, so it's very difficult for him to influence their life or to help them or so on. But he's constantly intent to help whoever he meets. And he's also intent into meeting everybody. So maybe I can talk a little bit like how this first, like again, also in the Mahayana, you have the first stage where you're trying to generate the mind of the Mahayana, this kind of attitude. And then afterwards, you have, once you have this attitude, you have the practices that are done by this practitioner. So what somebody who wants to go towards the Mahayana, what he wants to become to be is a so-called bodhisattva, an enlightenment being. So this bodhisattva is a being that is set on enlightenment, wants to gain enlightenment. So that he gets there by way of different stages. So the first thing he understands is that he and everybody else are exactly the same, as I described before. He wants to be happy, he wants to be free of suffering, everybody else is the same. He understands that he can be free of suffering, he can be blissful and free, everybody else also can be blissful, can be free. He also understands that you yourself is only one person, while the other beings are limitless. So it becomes immediately apparent it is much more important to help all others than just yourself. You're, in comparison to this mass of suffering that exists out there in all this continuum of all the sentient beings, you're just one. So this is indeed something that this person would reflect on, that he's maybe not so important because it's just one. So maybe you feel already uneasy when I say that, because you get a certain kind of feeling for that this is a very advanced practice, And the next thing that the goal of this person would be to do something which is called exchanging oneself with others. So the person really wants to work on his attitude of seeing himself as in the center of the universe, and everybody else kind of happens also to be there, and change that into putting everybody else in the center. Yeah, the whole direction of all his activity, of all his working, and all his trying to bring forth benefit is no longer with regard to himself, but for everybody else. So he's working on that he can actually change his attitude. So technically, this is called going away from self-cherishing and instead going for cherishing others. So this practitioner is thinking about that he is like this. It's very difficult to bring about this change. It's very difficult to bring about this change where you see everybody else as the focus of your activity, and the happiness of everybody else as being that what is to be achieved rather than only your own. So therefore, he uses all kind of methods. But the first problem is this: that we feel much more connected to ourselves than to everybody else. So we simply have this feeling that we are more important than others. So one thing again to deal with this is to understand that they are as important because they're having the same kind of sufferings and they have the same kind of pain and the same capacity for happiness, while the actual experience of happiness is very limited. So you already kind of can work with what is called equalizing. So you go away from thinking that you're the most important one to a state of mind where you understand that you're as important as everybody else. And then you work further to see them as even being more important than yourself. So one way that you connect with other beings is by remembering their kindness. So first of all, you are understanding that you're connected to everybody. And you're connected to everybody by way of having understood very deeply the fact of your rebirth. So you think about, you think first of all how you have a mother in this life, and how this mother has been very kind to you in many, many ways. So for many people in the West, this is a problem. Many people in the West have maybe a difficult relationship with their mother or something like this. So for a Tibetan, it is completely clear that the mother is the most kind person in your life. And so even if we ourselves have maybe trained ourselves to see faults with our mother, or to give her the fault for our life, or I don't know what, it remains a fact that we are born, that we have this precious human rebirth, this opportunity that we have right now, because our mother gave birth to us. And that was probably not the most joyful experience for her. It was a lot of pain included and so forth. And there is a lot of women that would abort. So you are here because your mother has not aborted you. She went through all this pain and through all this limitation for 9 months or whatever, and in the end gave birth to you, and after that took care of you, raised you, fed you, and so forth. You would never have survived after birth if there wouldn't have been a lot of compassion and a lot of care and a loving attitude around you, probably from both parents, but probably especially from the mother. So that's something that the person of this great scope would take as a meditation object, would meditate on how the mother of this life was very kind. And by remembering this kindness, the person would also then go further and remember that he had a mother in all those lives before. And this mother was not always the same person, was not the mother of this life necessarily. So by reflecting on this, how in many, many, many lifetimes in the past, you have been connected to other sentient beings such that you were born from their body. You were so utterly connected to them that you were born from their body. I can remember when my sister was pregnant, she felt an incredible unity with this being inside of her, and it was a shock for her when she gave birth. She had to really kind of deal with this experience of being separate through birth, through cutting the umbiliculum, the navel cord. It was a real shock for her. So all these beings in the past that were our mothers in this last lives were forming such a unity with us. They were experiencing us as being part of them. And then they gave birth, and then they took care of her. Was working for us, if you like, taking care of us, caring for us. So that's what the person would reflect on, that he's actually connected to everybody through millions and millions of past lives. And virtually everybody has given birth to you in past lives. So, of course, this is not something easy to feel. Yeah? For example, if you would just check on yourself, how do you feel when I tell you that everybody in the room there, you 4 people, have given birth to each other many, 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 many times? You were inside the body of the other people here in the room, and you were felt as a unity, and you were taken care of by everybody here in this room in all the past lives. So I would expect that this is a rather difficult thought. But we need to remember that the Mahayana is the 3rd step after having gone through the other steps. So a person who would turn towards the Mahayana, would try to develop this kind of thoughts, has long dealt with the idea of rebirth. Clear that he had many, many lives in the past. It's also very clear about the birth process and so forth. Yeah. So it's not something alien to this person to meditate on that he had many mothers in the past lives. So anyway, just to describe the process. So he would remember that he had mothers in the past life, just he has one like one in this life. He would be clear about that these mothers of the past life, and it's not just 2 or 3 or 7 past lives, but thousands and millions and myriads of past lives, that these beings that were mothers in these myriads of past lives was not always the same person, or not even just 10 different people, but was probably everybody in the universe has already given birth to you. So then there's already this connection. And the next step is to remember the kindness of the mother of this life, and how in the very same way, so you're not just connected, but you're even connected through an innumerable amount of intensive love and care of all these beings. So that even increases this feel of connectedness. and it also generates a certain gratitude towards them. And that's what you want to generate. You want to generate a mind of connectedness, a mind of gratitude. And on the basis of this mind of gratitude, at one point there arises a mind of wanting to repay the kindness. To go back to the sentient beings and repay all this care that you have received from them, all this compassion, all this loving attitude that you have received. Then, talking about somebody who actually is practicing towards the Mahayana, has a clear understanding about rebirth, has a clear understanding how there could be liberation, has a clear understanding about what's going on in the mind, what kind of afflictions are there, what kind of hindrances for happiness and so forth are there. Then when you want to repay the kindness, you don't want to repay the kindness by inviting them over for some food in a restaurant. You want to give them something really beneficial. You really want to help them with all their problems, as they have been taking care of you when you were just born from the womb and you were completely helpless, and they have completely dedicated themselves to you. You want to dedicate yourself to them by helping them with that, what really matters, which is that they can purify their mind, that they can liberate their mind from all the things that are causing them pain and suffering and rebirth and death and rebirth, and instead bring them to a state where the potential for peace and happiness and bliss is actually manifested. So therefore, you want to repay the kindness not just by kind of being friendly to them or saying nice words to them, that anyway, but you want to actually repay the kindness by doing spiritual benefit for them, even highest benefit, like liberating them out of samsara altogether. So that's your idea. You come to this point where you want them all to be happy in the highest way, yeah, in a free way, in a way of having a permanent joy, not just some instances of happiness. So you're actually aiming at them gaining spiritual goals. So this kind of state of mind you could call love, great love. You have the wish that all these other sentient beings that have been your mothers in the past, that they may be only happy in the highest form. And you also generate something which is called great compassion, which is again the wish to liberate them from all their sufferings. May they be free from this suffering. But actually it goes a little bit further than that. It is not just saying, may they be free from this suffering, may they have happiness. This is a form of love and compassion that you will also find in the practices of the so-called Hinayana, of the practice of the middling scope. And also in the middling scope, where you are working towards liberating yourself from samsara, part of the path is that you also work with factors like love and compassion. But there's something called the four immeasurables: immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable rejoicing, or I say joy, and immeasurable equanimity. So there is this compassion and love is not a topic only for the Mahayana. That exists also in the other practices, in the other levels. But in the Mahayana, the thing is that you go further. You're not just saying, may these kind human beings, may this so-called mother sentient beings that are afflicted and don't even understand that they're going to have a rebirth, far from understanding that they could be liberated into nirvana, may they become happy, may they become free of any suffering. You don't leave it at that. You're actually taking responsibility. You're saying, I myself will bring about that they are liberated. I myself will bring about that their suffering ends. I myself will set them in highest bliss. And then there's even a stronger step to that, which is when you say, don't only say like, I myself will bring them to this level, but as it happens, there's already many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They're already working for all sentient beings. So I'm going to do something for them. And then together we're going to bring them somehow to liberation. But not so, but you even go one stronger. You make this compassion even stronger by not just saying, I myself will bring them into a state free of suffering and full of bliss. But I will bring them to this state. I will bring all sentient beings, all limitless sentient beings to that state by myself alone. I myself going to revolutionize the universe and all universes. So that's pretty strong. That's pretty unheard of. This is like it almost sounds like hubris, you know. It's really, really, really strong. So the thing is that he's generating this kind of attitude. I myself will bring them all to this state. But then he's also, so he's actually feeling that. Yeah? The person is actually feeling this, the practitioner is actually feeling that this is what he wants to do. But then he's also aware that he's actually limited himself. He is himself still in samsara. He is himself still kind of limited, such that he's not even liberated himself, has not become free of suffering himself, has not attained this state of a permanent happiness or bliss himself. So then he doesn't give up on this project of liberating everybody into samsara, into nirvana, but he doesn't give up. But he thinks like, so okay, if I am not able to liberate these beings in my present state, then what would I have to learn? What would I have to do? What would I have to how would I have to transform myself? What kind of spiritual capacities would I have to gain in order to be able to help sentient beings, and especially help all sentient beings? So what kind of state of mind would be the best in order to help all these sentient beings? And so he understands that he has the capacity to be enlightened. He has the capacity to be a completely enlightened Buddha. And he understands that the Buddha is free of any kind of hindrances. Yeah, so that he's actually in a state way beyond even nirvana. He has much more capacities than nirvana has. And he understands, if I would become such a Buddha, then indeed I would be so liberated, and I would be so capable that I indeed could see through my project of helping all sentient beings. So on the basis of this great compassion and of this so-called special intention that I'm going to liberate all sentient beings by myself alone, I'm going to set all sentient beings in bliss by myself alone. On the basis of that, this person is now generating a mind that therefore what I want to attain is complete Buddhahood. The Buddhahood is especially characterized by being omniscient. So that's another concept which is maybe difficult for us to deal with. So the Buddha is said to be omniscient. And so the Bodhisattva is especially interested in this omniscience. The Bodhisattva is interested in this omniscience because by completely omniscient engagement with other beings, with all these other beings, by this complete understanding of the other person, of the other beings, he will be able to do exactly that, what the other person needs. He will completely understand the other person by far more than the suffering person in samsara will understand him or herself. He will completely understand the other person, what kind of karmic imprints there are, what kind of character traits there are, what kind of possibilities there are. When he says this and this, what will this trigger in the other person, and so forth. So that this person that is intent on helping all sentient beings becomes very interested in this kind of state of a Buddha. He wants really to gain enlightenment. So he's aiming out of his great compassion, out of this taking the responsibility for all sentient beings, is aiming at the omniscient state of a Buddha. So by way of that he is motivated by great compassion and is aiming at the state of a Buddha, what he's generating here is what is called bodhicitta. Yeah? So bodhicitta is the key factor in the Mahayana. If, by generating bodhicitta, you have generated this wish to become a completely enlightened Buddha. So in other words, you have now the motivation or the drive, the longing for Buddhahood, which you need in order to do all the practices that lead you there. So you have this drive for Buddhahood, and this came out of, on the one hand, great compassion for all sentient beings and the wish to help them. On the other hand, on the understanding that you need the capacity of a Buddha in order to help them. So this is what this bodhicitta is about. And this is, at that time, the person has completely exchanged himself with others. He has seen them by far more important than himself. He is aiming at spiritual attainments for the sake of others. And by generating this mind of bodhicitta, the person is then called a bodhisattva. When you are generating the mind of bodhicitta, at that time you're entering the Mahayana path. This is the bodhicitta is expressed as being the door to the Mahayana. So therefore, the Mahayana in the Great Scope is actually the practice or the scope of the bodhisattva, and it's the practice and the scope of the bodhisattva that is working towards becoming enlightened, omniscient Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. It is the path that all the Buddhas in the past have walked. All the Buddhas that are existing now, like for example, the Buddha Shakyamuni, have gone through this kind of practice to generate bodhicitta, and on the basis of bodhicitta have entered the Mahayana and have then done the practice of the Mahayana. So in the Mahayana, as I said, the Bodhisattva is especially interested in this omniscient part of the Buddha's quality. So as a matter of fact, the Buddha also has highest forms of bliss. So just to introduce some terms in the middling scope, where we are aiming at getting liberated from samsara. Yeah, so this is actually what the Hinayana is about. So when we talk about Mahayana and Hinayana, Mahayana is the great vehicle, and Hinayana is what somebody is translated as the modest vehicle. And so why is one the great vehicle and one is the modest vehicle? Because the vehicle of the middling scope, the so-called Hinayana, is actually just a vehicle for one person. It is delivering one person out of the samsaric state. And the Mahayana is a vehicle to deliver limitless sentient beings out of the samsaric state into high states of bliss and liberation and freedom. So that's why it's called a Mahayana. So in the Hinayana, where you are working solely for yourself, but this is not to be taken as a put-down. As I said, it's amazing if somebody has the courage to really destroy the workings of this universe of samsara that he has been living in since limitless times, and he's willing to revolutionize this whole experience of himself to break this cycle of rebirth, and he's working for that. Huge vision. This person has a great spiritual vision, has great courage, and is actually engaging into all these practices. So if somebody does that and is successful with this practice and reaches nirvana, is completely liberated of samsara, then he's called a so-called arhat. And that's translated as a foe destroyer, somebody who has destroyed the enemy being the afflictions and karma and so forth, and the workings of samsara. So he has destroyed this in his mind, he's free of that. So in that, he is gaining the so-called bliss of nirvana. And as I said, the bliss of nirvana is actually that what we are looking for. It is a form of bliss which is lasting. It is peace and freedom and openness with the joy, with the happiness that is lasting, and not just another kick, another short experience. It is a lasting, fulfilling, satisfied state of mind. So I'm describing that because I want to say that's what we're actually looking for. We're looking for these lasting forms of happiness. But outside of samsara, there's a whole spiritual realm with many, many experiences, with many, many different levels of experience of bliss and of happiness and of lasting bliss and happiness. So there's different degrees. Yeah? By what I'm saying is you can attain nirvana without getting rid of all the different obstacles or hindrances in your mind. You have to get rid of certain obstacles, the ones that keep you in samsara. But even such a liberated being in nirvana is not free of everything. The one who's free of all the problems in the mind is the Buddha. So as you get rid of more and more things, even out there in nirvana, you're gaining more and more freedom and more space and higher levels of bliss. So the Buddha is actually in the state of a highest level of bliss. So actually you want to place beings not only in nirvana, but you want to state them into this highest bliss of the Buddha. So that's what you are aiming for with regard to the sentient beings as a bodhisattva. You want to become a Buddha in order to lead all sentient beings to the bliss of Buddha. But for yourself, what you're interested in is the omniscience of the Buddha, the capacity of the Buddha, the skills that the Buddha has. So that's what you're interested in. So you're interested in this so-called omniscience. And so what they're talking about in the Mahayana is that there is, I already mentioned this, there's different limitations in our mind. One of them is called the afflicted obscurations. So we're obscured by something that is like the afflictions, like anger, like jealousy, like hate, and so forth. And this is the ones that keep us in samsara. So if we get rid of those, we are liberated of samsara and we gain a state of lasting bliss. But the other one is called the obscurations or to omniscience. So if you get rid of those, then your mind is actually becoming vast and limitless, so that you can actually know all objects. So I want to maybe it's good to drop a word on this notion of omniscience. Like from the very beginning here in our Discovering Buddhism course, we were again and again looking at the mind, how the mind is a phenomenon that doesn't have color or shape. It's a phenomenon that doesn't weigh anything or has a certain taste or smell or something. It is defined as something which is clear and knowing. That's all. It is simply a phenomenon that is clear, such that the objects that it engages in are shining up in the mind, and not only are they represented there, but they are actually cognitively used. In other words, there's this knowing going on. This knowing does not mean that you know them correctly. Also, a wrong consciousness, where you're making a mistake or something. Also, that is a consciousness and is clear knowing. Anyway, so my point is that the mind is defined as clear and knowing. So the question actually comes: if that's what it is, if this is what this phenomenon mind is about, then why does it not know everything? Why is this phenomenon that is beyond color and shape or anything like this, anything material, why does it not know everything in the first place? In other words, it should be omniscient. It should simply know. It's the phenomenon is clear knowing. So the answer in Buddhist terms is this is because there is obscurations in the mind. It's natural for the mind to know everything. Omniscience is not a super holy or supreme state or something like that, extraordinary state. It is simply when the mind is healthy. When the mind is healthy, it knows everything, because it is simply clear and knowing. So that it is not clear knowing, that it is not knowing everything right now, is due to there something going wrong in the mind. There's something there which is obscuring the mind, is limiting the mind, is setting the mind in a limitation that is not natural for it. So that's what these obscurations to omniscience are about. So the Arhat, the foe destroyer of the Hinayana, is not concerned with those, because he is not into omniscience. He is into liberation from samsara. And this is what you can attain while still being obscured with regard to all phenomena, with regard to omniscience. You can attain a liberation from samsara while still having these obscurations to omniscience in the mind. So the Hinayana Arhat, he's aiming at liberating himself from samsara. He's aiming at his own liberation and so forth. So he doesn't care so much if he's omniscient while he's free in nirvana. He doesn't care if he knows all phenomena while he is finally experiencing lasting bliss. He is caring for getting rid of the afflicted obscurations. But the Bodhisattva is interested in gaining the capacity to help all sentient beings. And he can only do so if he gets omniscient. he's actually interested in omniscience. It's not a byproduct, it is what he's looking for. So he's really having as his main object that he wants to get rid of this knowledge obscurations, these obscurations to omniscience. This is his main objective because he's so filled with this love and compassion, with this great love and great compassion. He's only thinking about how to benefit other beings. And he needs to become desperately omniscient in order to be able to help them. So that's what he's aiming at. So the fact is that there is not really like a choice, like you could either go for the afflicted obscurations or for the knowledge obscurations. If you want to go if you want to get rid of the knowledge obscurations, then actually, in order to get rid of the knowledge obscurations, you first have to get rid of the but is still afflicted with anger or attachment or something, while the Hinayana art is free of that, but is not omniscient. So the Bodhisattva will get rid of everything. So his afflicted obscurations, they will fall away on the side, as he is aiming constantly at getting rid of these knowledge obscurations. So the Buddha is free of everything, and that's what the Bodhisattva is aiming for. He is aiming for becoming a Buddha. The Buddha is free of any possible form of obscuration or contamination or affliction in his mind, anything that is unnatural in the mind, anything that is kind of faulty or, if you like, spiritually sick in the mind. All of this he has removed. He's just completely in the pure, purified, sane, fully empowered state of mind. And that's what the Bodhisattva is aiming for, because this mind is very powerful in helping others. So the Buddha is as free of samsara as is this Hinayana Arhat, but he has much more freedom than that. And out of this more freedom, he has gained much more capacities, which are all as a potential. They are in us all right now, which is called Buddha nature. We all have Buddha nature, such that this capacity to become a Buddha is indestructible in us. Even if we do horrible things to others, if we become, I don't know, war criminals or psychopaths or whatever, all of this is just fleeting stains. It's just fleeting states, states of rebirth, or fleeting states of darkness in the mind. In the end, the Buddha nature, the capacity to become completely free into the state of a Buddha, completely spiritually healthy, completely spiritually sane, always remains with us. Also, the Hinayana Arhat has that. The Hinayana Arhat is free of samsara, but he has not completely activated all his potential. He has not become a Buddha yet. So therefore, Arhat will later on, while being in Nirvana, while being free, move on to higher levels of the Mahayana. So what I'm presenting to you here is the normal presentation of the Mahayana. There's actually different schools. So maybe if you later on enter into deeper studies, you will find out that there's certain philosophical schools that would actually say, if you become an Arhat, that's it. You cannot move further. You will never become a Buddha. So that level that I'm talking to you from, like what is called the Prasangika philosophy, which is the philosophy normally held as the highest philosophy in Tibetan Buddhism or in Gelugpa Buddhism, they would say everybody in the end will become enlightened. So also a Hinayana Arhat still has this Buddha nature, and he can develop further from his Hinayana attainment of Arhatship, of Nirvana, and then later on get rid of the rest of the obscurations in his mind. So anyway, the Bodhisattva is aiming for this from the very beginning, and he's aiming for this completely free, completely purified state of a Buddha out of his great compassion and out of his great love for all sentient beings. He wants to become a Buddha, not just because of the bliss or the purity of the Buddha, but because of the capacity of the Buddha. He feels that then he is finally empowered to actually do what he's aiming for, which is helping all sentient beings in the highest way. So that doesn't mean, of course, that the Bodhisattva is not helping anyone before he becomes a Buddha, but he's very clear that his work for others is very limited, because he's not yet omniscient, because he doesn't understand fully all the sentient beings in front of himself. So the Bodhisattva will practice, once he enters into the Mahayana, he will practice many Mahayana practices in order to actually gain this state of enlightenment. And by these practices, by many of these practices, you will actually already benefit others. So these practices can be described in many different ways. You can say the Bodhisattva is practicing the so-called 6 perfections. You can say the Bodhisattva is practicing wisdom and method and wisdom. You can say that Bodhisattva is practicing the 5 paths, or is practicing the 4 paths in order to gain the final path of a Buddha. So, I mean, we don't have too much time as usual, so I'm just going to touch on this stuff. So, one is the 6 perfections. The 6 perfections are talking about that the Bodhisattva is going to practice generosity. He's going to practice ethical discipline. He's going to practice patience. He's going to practice a joyous effort. Yeah, being joyful and being able to engage full-heartedly with great inspiration in the Dharma practices to complete enlightenment. He's going to practice concentrations, and he's going to practice wisdom, especially the wisdom understanding the final reality of all things. So actually, these practices are Mahayana practices because they are done with the motivation of bodhicitta. You could do the very same practices with a Hinayana motivation, and then they would become practices that are leading to nirvana only. Yeah, so also the Hinayana practitioner is practicing generosity, ethical discipline, patience, joyous effort, concentrations, and wisdom. So the Bodhisattva is doing this always with this attitude. When he is practicing generosity, it has an incredible impact because he does this with a mind that he's practicing for the sake of all sentient beings. All his practices are always including all sentient beings. So therefore, he's everything that he's doing has kind of this vast basis, if you like, or this vast context, and therefore he's, for example, generating much stronger positive potential from that. Then another thing is that he's practicing the 6 perfections within the 6 perfections. So there's a generosity of generosity, an ethical discipline of generosity, a patience of generosity, a joyous effort of generosity, and a concentration of generosity, and the wisdom of generosity. So, for example, the generosity of generosity could be that you are actually engaging other people into generosity by way of your generosity. So that's not just that you're giving something, but this actually brings others to do the same thing. Then you can have an ethical discipline of generosity. So you're keeping, for example, the bodhisattva vows, the special type of ethical discipline for bodhisattvas. The bodhisattva vows, you keep those bodhisattva vows while practicing generosity. You make completely sure that you're not harming anybody while you're practicing generosity. You're making completely sure that you are practicing generosity with something that is not attained in harmful ways. For example, you're not stealing somewhere in order to give this to somebody else. So you practice, you abide in ethical discipline. You abide in patience. So you're generous to somebody, and the other person reacts to that. What is that? All what you're going to give to me? Really? That's all what you're going to give? He's completely staying patient. He's not getting angry in his practice of generosity. Just as an example. Then with joyous effort. So he's not kind of doing this generosity in order to get rid of this beggar. He's not doing this generosity because he is supposed to do this or something, but he's really aiming at that. He's really understanding why he's doing that, how this is his practice. He's really engaging with effort. He's engaging with joy and so forth. So he's joyful while he's giving to, let's say, to a beggar something, or to make some other generous act. Then he's concentrated while he's doing this. He's not kind of distracted in his mind thinking about something else while he's giving this offering. And he's doing it with wisdom. So wisdom is especially talking about the wisdom realizing emptiness. So he's understanding so emptiness is referring to the final mode of existence of everything. So this is a difficult topic, how to say. Yeah, how to say. Anyway, so there is a key factor in both for the practice of the Hinayana and the Mahayana is actually that the Buddha, I think we talked about this last time, hopefully it was in the video that you were watching, that the very source why we are caught in samsara is the karma that we are accumulating is keeping us in samsara. Due to karma, we take rebirth. This karma is coming from our afflictions. And these afflictions are coming from a so-called root affliction, which is an ignorance about how we exist, how the world exists. So we basically don't understand how the world exists, and not understand how it exists, but we think it exists in a certain way, which is completely fantasized. So we have a certain perception of the world, that the world exists in a certain way, which is completely opposite to how it actually exists. So I just mentioned this word emptiness. Emptiness is talking about that the actual mode of existence of everything is that it is empty of how we think it is. It is empty, technically speaking, it is empty of inherent existence. So the Buddha is describing that we are actually grasping everything to be inherently existent, but things are actually empty of inherent existence. So I think I can just touch on this right now. It's a very, very difficult topic, but I'm just saying that if you get rid, the whole Buddhist concept is this, that if you get rid of this misunderstanding about yourself, how you exist and how the world exists, then on that basis, you can, by understanding this, you will no longer be full of attachment or anger or jealousy and so forth, so the afflictions will fall away. You will no longer accumulate karma, and the whole of samsara falls away. So this kind of wisdom here, also the Bodhisattva is applying, because actually the knowledge obscuration that I was talking about earlier are something like a residue from that ignorance. So even if you have become liberated out of samsara, you have no longer this ignorance, therefore you're no longer producing these afflictions, no more longer this karma, the whole system of samsara has been destroyed. But still there's a residue left of that. That means that while you are no longer grasping for inherent existence, there's still an appearance of inherent existence. But you don't believe it anymore. The Arhat does not believe this appearance. So what is actually keeping you from becoming omniscient is this appearance. So you need to get rid of this appearance. This appearance is the actual knowledge obscuration. So also that you get rid of by meditating further on this wisdom realizing emptiness. So what the Bodhisattva is doing in his generosity, he is practicing generosity with the awareness that he, as the giver of the offering, is empty of inherent existence. The substance that he is giving is empty of inherent existence. And also the one who is receiving is empty of inherent existence. So for example, he, as a Bodhisattva giving something, is not inherently a giver. And that what is given there is not inherently an offering. And that what is the person who's receiving is not inherently a beggar, is not inherently a receiver. So you are somebody who's giving, but not inherently, just as a dependent arising. This is an offering, but not inherently, just as a dependent arising. This is a beggar, but not inherently, just as a dependent arising. So maybe I just leave you with these terms, just for you to have heard them or something. I hope I didn't create more confusion than clarifying something. So I'm just saying that there is this practice of wisdom of the Bodhisattva, which is the sixth perfection, but he's already practicing it within the first perfection of generosity. And the same thing is then true for the perfection of ethics. So there's also a perfection of generosity of ethics, a practice of the perfection of the ethics of ethics, of the patience of ethics, the choice effort of ethics, the concentration of ethics, and the wisdom of ethics, and so forth. Yeah. So that's kind of a little bit describing what the Bodhisattva is doing here. Another way to describe the practices of the Bodhisattva is by way of saying that the Bodhisattva is practicing method and wisdom. So method and wisdom is such that, from what I described now a little bit, you might understand that actually it's about wisdom. Wisdom is this wisdom realizing reality, this emptiness, is what is destroying the afflicted obscurations. It is that what is destroying the knowledge obscurations. So all that what keeps the mind that is just clear knowing from being omniscient, all these different obscurations and let's say the dirt in the mind, is in the end eradicated by this wisdom. But they say that this wisdom needs to have some kind of energy behind it, some support, some strength. And that strength, the support, this nourishment, is coming from the method side. So on the one hand, we work especially with wisdom, but then on the method side, you have, for example, generosity or ethics and so forth. So you can play with the 6 perfections and divide them into these 2 branches of wisdom and method. And so somebody might really say, well, as both obscurations, the afflicted obscurations, especially the ignorance, which is the root of all these afflictions, is destroyed by wisdom, the opposite to ignorance, and also the obscurations, which is this appearance of inner existence, is also destroyed by wisdom. Why would I have to practice generosity or ethics or something like this? Is it not enough to just practice wisdom? So then they always bring this example of a bird that is flying to enlightenment, and that a bird is flying with 2 wings and not with 1 wing. You need 2 wings. So both wings are necessary, the wisdom side and also the method side, because the method side gives the energy, it gives the invigoration of the mind for doing this whole path. So that's one way of describing the practice of a bodhisattva. Then there's a description of 5 paths, where there's 4 paths: path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, is what is actually preparing the bodhisattva so that he reaches the 5th path, the path of normal learning, which is the resultant path of a Buddha. So this is all paths which are mainly talking about how bodhicitta develops, how the wisdom realizing emptiness develops, and so forth. So that's very technical. I think we don't have to go into. But this is kind of these practices that the bodhisattva is doing. So the main point here is probably to understand that the bodhisattva has a very specific attitude. Yeah, so what I was talking about in the first half of this evening, how you get to this attitude of bodhicitta. Yeah, so that's the main to understand, that the bodhisattva has actually exchanged himself for others. He's doing all his spiritual practice for the sake of others. So he lives in a completely different universe. You know, he's completely kind of, this universe is completely vast. He's not. He's beyond this state of being self-centered. And so this being self-centered is a very harsh word, you know. It seems like egoistic or something like that. But actually, this self-centeredness is not something that is an affliction. The Arhat is self-centered because he hasn't exchanged himself for others, but he's completely free of samsara and he has gained a permanent bliss. So the bodhisattva, kind of almost like a switch, like a light switch, is just kind of opting for the other approach. He's saying, like, instead of focusing only on myself, I'm going to focus on everybody else. And in this way, his universe is limitless. He's completely motivated and completely perceiving the world on a completely different angle. So that's kind of what the Mahayana practitioner is doing. He makes this great transformation from being interested in his own spiritual development for his own sake, and from there away to taking all sentient beings into his account, into his vision, and is then trying to become the highest, most developed being, a Buddha, for the sake of all sentient beings. And again, this is the path that the Buddha himself actually walked. Yeah? So all Buddhas are produced or are growing out of bodhisattvas. These bodhisattvas, these Mahayana beings, they are the actual seed of the Buddhas. So all the Buddhas at one point made this exchange. They exchanged themselves for others. They switched around from being centering on their own development to the development of all sentient beings. And then they were focusing on having Buddha nature and being able to become a completely enlightened Buddha, free of any spiritual limitation. So from this description, therefore, we can understand something about what the Buddha is again, and this again helps us with our refuge. Going for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we can understand what qualities he has. He has completely exchanged himself for others. He has not just some kind of love or compassion or care for us, but he is not thinking about himself whatsoever. He is completely concerned with everybody else, so also with us. So he is only having this project of bringing everybody to enlightenment, so also he has the project of bringing us to enlightenment. This is why he became enlightened. He became enlightened in order to bring us to enlightenment. I would say this is something that we can build on. This is a refuge I can turn to, somebody who is dedicated to me. Somebody who has completely liberated himself from all kind of spiritual nonsense in the mind, all kind of afflictions or obscurations, and now is in that state of highest development, completely dedicated, amongst others, to my spiritual development. That's a refuge. This is somebody that I can put my trust in. This is somebody that I'm very interested in listening what he has to give as advice. That is somebody I can get inspired from. This is somebody that I can refer to so I can bring my own spiritual path further and so forth. So that's what this refuge jewel of the Buddha is actually about. And the refuge jewel of the Dharma is about all these final attainments. So either, let's say, to make it very, very concise, it's not complete, but the Dharma jewel is talking about the attainments of the Buddha, for example, and also the freedoms of the Buddha, how he is free of all these different obscurations. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe just in 1 minute, the Mahayana then actually has 2 levels. There's the so-called perfection vehicle. This is what I was talking about right now a little bit. And then there's also another method, which is having a very different approach, which is Tantra. So Tantra is always a Mahayana practice. There's no Hinayana Tantra, and there's no Tantric practices in order just to get a good rebirth on the small scope. So the Tantric teachings are also in order to gain enlightenment. So that's very for somebody who has exchanged himself with others, is focusing on the benefit of all beings, and wants to become completely enlightened because he has this potential and he wants to manifest it, so he's capable to bring all sentient beings to enlightenment. So Tantra says that it is a quicker path than Sutra, but in the end it remains to be seen. It depends on the individual practitioner if this is suitable for him or her or something like that. So anyway, Tantra is only a quicker path if it is based on Sutra. Without bodhicitta, there is no Tantra practice. Without the understanding of emptiness, of this wisdom that I was talking about, touching on a little bit, there's no effective practice of Tantra. Yeah? So it's not about just saying some mantras or having a tanka at home or something like that. Tantra is an incredibly advanced practice for very high-level bodhisattvas. And if they are equipped with certain realizations from the sutra, if they have the foundation of sutra, then indeed the tantric practice can bring them very quick to enlightenment. That's a little bit like what the Great Scope is about. Tibetan Buddhism is actually Mahayana, so it is actually solely aiming at this kind of practice. Tibetan Buddhism is really propagating, is really kind of going for this bodhisattva ideal, this bodhisattva path, and is really trying to invite everybody to really take this path to complete Buddhahood. So neither is Tibetan Buddhism interested in solely bringing people to a good rebirth? Nor is it interested in bringing them just to nirvana. Tibetan Buddhism is completely aiming at everybody manifesting their Buddha nature and become completely spiritually clean and pure and fully developed into the state of a Buddha. So therefore, in the Lamrim of Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of Gelugpa tradition here, when he's describing the practices that you're doing in order to gain a good rebirth, so what we call the lower scope, when he's describing that, he calls that the practices we have in common with somebody of the small scope. And he says this because we are not of the small scope. We're trying to be of the great scope. And when he describes the middling level, the middling scope, he says the practices that we have in common with the middle scope, because we are not middle scope. We try to be of the great scope. And when he describes the practices of the great scope, he simply says the practices of the great scope, not what we have in common with the great scope, because this is what we're actually aiming for. So that's maybe good to know. But again, actually, this is what I want to do next time. I want to talk about the connections between these three realms, because you cannot just jump into the Mahayana. You have to base yourself on the other. That's why we need these practices common with these other levels. Yeah, I guess this was a lot of input. And that's what you get when you come to a teaching for 1.5 hours. I was wondering if you have any kind of questions or remarks. Does this make any sense what I was saying? Or yeah, there's a question here.
Got the question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello.
You mentioned earlier that some of the people don't actually understand how the world is or how it functions. Could you develop whether you mean by the world, I don't know, planet Earth or the entire universe, just the mind, or everything actually?
Yeah, okay, very good question. So it is really about everything. It is not just kind of this planet or your subjective world or something like this. We actually don't understand. Like maybe let's say, what could we take? It's really about the whole world. But what I'm saying is like both the outer world and the inner world. We don't understand the ultimate level of existence of our own mind, of our own feelings. We don't understand who we are, our person, our personality, what we are as a living being. We don't understand the others. We don't understand the universe. I mean, when I say we don't understand, it's always talking about this final level of existence, how it actually exists. I'm not talking about gravity, or we don't understand that water is liquid and stone is hard. Of course, we understand that water is liquid and stone is hard. We can also understand that the Earth is going around the sun and the moon is going around the Earth and so forth. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that all these things appear to us to exist in a certain way that has nothing to do with the reality. So means we understand water to be water, but further on, the Buddha says we're having an appearance together with this, as if this is water in and out of itself. So actually, it is not water in and out of itself. It is a dependent arising. That it is water is depending on many things. Or like, maybe quite good to take it with yourself. Yeah. So one might feel that oneself is existing like as if we have a core, as if there's something solid there. But actually, we only exist as a dependent arising. Yeah. So when you start to think about reincarnation, for example. So let's say now if you think about yourself, then you think about that I'm a woman somehow, and I'm a human somehow, and I'm Romanian somehow, and I know I'm intelligent somehow, and so forth. But if you die and you take a rebirth as a male fish, in what way are you a woman? In what way are you a human? In what way are you intelligent? In what way are you Romanian? So what I mean is, all of this is true. You are Romanian and you are a woman. and you are intelligent, and you are a human being, but you feel like you are more a human being than you actually are. You feel like you're inherently a human being. You feel like that's what you are at your core, which is not the case. You're not a human being at your core. So can actually be very frightening if you think about it, that in the end there is no core, because this is exactly what we feel. We should have a core. We should be something because we inherently exist. And the Buddha says we do not inherently exist. So that's a little bit like what it's about. If when we talk about ourselves, maybe there can be a certain taste coming up for that, but the same thing is true for everything really. For mountains, for planets, for the universe, even the universe. There is a universe, but we feel like this universe is inherently existent. It is not a dependent arising and so forth. Does it make any sense?
Yes, a lot. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Cool. I thought I'm not getting this across somehow. Any other questions?
No.
Everything crystal clear. Great.
Not so clear, but we have to think about it. Give
Okay.
us a lot of new information.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I mean, I also feel like that maybe I'm too overwhelming, or I give you too much information. But yeah, I mean, we have a big topic like the Mahayana, you know. It's pretty much including everything. But anyway, I feel like you know, as this is kind of a beginner's course, or maybe for many of us, it's a beginner's course. It's also fine to just take whatever you can take. You know, and nobody is expecting that you understand everything immediately. You shouldn't expect it of yourself. So whatever you can take from it, you can take from it. And I sincerely hope that you will have many opportunities in the future to hear this whole presentation again, or you have the video also and so forth. Right. So you're going to have a discussion group on this, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you suggest some topics for us?
Yeah, maybe best to discuss this. Like, there's two topics which immediately come to mind. One is, do you think that you can exchange yourself for others? Do you think you could live your life such that you only think about others? I mean, only think about others does not mean that you're not aware that you exist, because you do exist. If you're not aware that you exist, you don't relate to reality. You do exist. So the Bodhisattva also knows that. But is it possible to live your life such that you are solely interested in the benefit of others? So that's, I think, something that you could discuss. And another thing, do you think that it is possible to become omniscient? What if it feels kind of strange? Would it feel strange? What would be an hindrance for the mind to be omniscient? How is this possible to be omniscient, or is it even possible? Maybe this is something you could discuss as well. And yeah, I mean, just to try to get clear what's the difference between the Mahayana and the Hinayana and so forth. Or, for example, discuss, does it make any sense to have as a project that you're going to lead everybody to complete enlightenment? Does it make any sense? Is this even, in what way is this happening? For example, there's myriads of Buddhas already, and we are still here. So what about their project of bringing everybody to enlightenment? And so forth, yeah?
Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. So maybe we can stop here by dedicating the merits of our efforts that we made tonight. And I think we all know why Marius is not here tonight. So maybe we can dedicate our positive energy that we generated here, especially to Marius, and that he's getting good through this period of his life, and also to his mother, that she has a very good rebirth. And again, from the Mahayana point of view, there is not just the mother of Marius who has died, but there is people dying all the time, so that all beings that have died have a good passage to the next life, and may this next life be a precious human rebirth. So may they reach the human realm, May they reach the human realm with interest in Dharma. May they meet the Dharma. May they meet teachers and gurus that are actually fully qualified, full of love and compassion, and take care of them and guide them along the path according to their capacity from life to complete enlightenment. And of course, may this not only happen for the people who have died, but also those who are alive. May they also meet the Mahayana teachings and be guided to complete enlightenment, which is their potential, which is their nature. May they become enlightened. And thank you very much. And then I wish you a nice evening and hope to see you in 2 weeks and have a nice discussion group.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.